Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I want you to think about your own life and your own experiences for just a second. Have you ever felt this deep, unexplainable sense of awe? Like a connection to something way bigger than yourself, but at the same time you felt totally disconnected from organized religion? Today, we are looking at a truly fascinating concept that honestly, at first glance, might actually seem like a bit of a contradiction. We're exploring the idea of believing in a creator, an ultimate reality or some transcendent intelligence, but doing so without actually adhering to a specific religious system. For so many people, belief in God and adherence to a religion are literally inseparable. You can't have one without the other. But what if they aren't? What if they are entirely distinct things?
Okay, let's dive into this. The central thesis we're examining today is that God and religion are fundamentally different concepts. It's a perspective suggesting that you can absolutely believe in a divine presence without having to accept that any single religious system possesses the complete exclusive truth about it. Essentially, it asks us to really look at the difference between the divine itself and the human structures we've built around it.
So here is our roadmap for today's exploration. First, we'll be defining God and religion. Second, we'll look at how things are shaped by human history. Third, we'll dive into identity, certainty, and morality. Fourth, we'll address the elephant in the room. And finally, number 5, spirituality without institutions.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, defining God and religion, the infinite versus the finite.
So if an ultimate creator exists, they existed long before human beings ever created institutions or wrote down scriptures or built places of worship. God, by definition in this context, would be infinite and transcendent. Religion, on the other hand, well, religion is finite. It's the way human beings, who, let's face it, have very limited knowledge, have attempted to understand and communicate their relationship with the divine. Believing in God doesn't logically require you to believe that every human interpretation of God is perfectly correct.
And this brilliantly illustrates a core concept. Think of it this way. Religion isn't a high-definition photograph of God. It's more like a human attempt to draw a map. And maps are incredibly helpful tools to navigate, right? But they are drawn by humans. They are absolutely not the actual landscape itself. This perspective validates religion as a deeply meaningful attempt to make sense of the divine, while recognizing that it is just that, an attempt.
Moving right along to section 2, shaped by human history, the fingerprints of culture. Now, religions do not just pop up in a cultural vacuum. If we look back through history, a religion's language, its customs, its institutions, even its forms of worship, they all bear the heavy fingerprints of the society in which they developed. This is exactly why different civilizations have entirely different understandings of things like creation, morality, death, and salvation. Even within the exact same religion, interpretations can change drastically depending on the time period and the geographical location.
Which raises an incredibly important rhetorical question for us to ponder. If God is universal, why are human understandings of God so culturally fragmented and diverse? The argument here is that this immense diversity actually tells us a whole lot more about human beings than it does about an infinite God. We can only really interpret the transcendent through the language, the concepts, and the everyday experiences that are actually available to us at any specific point in time. Let's transition to section 3, identity, certainty, and morality, the human need.
Let's move forward and see how this builds on that idea of cultural fingerprints. Consider how belief is actually passed down. A lot of times, religion is inherited rather than consciously chosen. A child born in one geography just naturally adopts that society's religion, while a child born somewhere else adopts a completely different one. Religious identity is frequently determined simply by geography and birth. And this is very different from spiritual conviction, which is something that arises from deep personal reflection, individual experience, and your own conscience.
And this ties directly into the human desire for certainty. As humans, we are naturally uncomfortable with ambiguity. We want to know why we're here. We want to know what happens after we die. And religion provides those answers. But the text we're analyzing highlights a really significant philosophical difference here. Saying, this is what I believe, expresses humility. But claiming, this is exactly what God is and anyone who disagrees with me is absolutely wrong, well, that claims absolute possession of ultimate truth. The danger arises when human interpretations of profound mysteries are turned into absolute certainties and then imposed on others. If God is infinite, the text suggests, humans should probably approach the divine with a bit more humility.
Now, another major reason people separate God from religion comes down to the question of morality. We have to impartially observe that while religious traditions have undeniably provided really powerful moral teachings and inspired just enormous acts of charity throughout history, they don't have a monopoly on it. People can absolutely recognize and practice compassion, honesty, justice, kindness, and fairness without belonging to any institution at all. Secular individuals and religious individuals alike are fully capable of demonstrating profound moral character.
Okay, moving on to section 4, the elephant in the room, fragments of truth. Now, what's really interesting here is how this concept tackles the exclusive claims different religions make about ultimate reality and salvation. Think of the classic analogy of several blindfolded people describing an elephant. One person touches the trunk, another touches the leg, another touches the ear. Now, each one of them is describing something completely real, but none of them possesses the whole elephant. Our religious traditions might be kind of similar to this. They might be partial fragments of humanity's ongoing search for an ultimate reality that is simply just beyond complete human comprehension.
Because institutions are run by human beings, they naturally carry human flaws. Historically speaking, religion has an enormous capacity to unite humanity, creating amazing solidarity and shared purpose. However, it can also become a very powerful marker of us versus them. History is literally full of conflicts where religious identity became super entangled with political power, nationalism, and exclusion. So the problem, as the text argues, isn't the belief in God itself, but the human tendency to convert that belief into identity and then turn that identity into superiority.
Which brings us to our final section, section 5, spirituality without institutions, the universal God.
Here, we really need to clearly distinguish between spirituality and religiosity. Spirituality is personal, it's experiential, and it is entirely inward. It's that sudden sense of wonder you feel before existence, or a deeply personal relationship with the transcendent. Religiosity, by contrast, tends to be institutional, communal, and doctrinal. It involves formal, administered human systems that come with rules, hierarchies, and physical property.
And because of that major distinction, you don't necessarily need the latter to experience the former. If God is truly omnipotent and transcendent, it makes sense that God doesn't require a human institution to exist or to be encountered. A person might easily encounter the divine in pure silence or by just looking up at the night sky, through human love, deep intellectual inquiry, or simple everyday acts of compassion. And they can do all of that without subscribing to a formal religious system. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought from our source material to wrap up today's explainer. If the divine is truly universal, if it is truly infinite and transcendent, does limiting God to a single institution, a specific culture, or one geographical tradition actually diminish the very universality we are trying to attribute to God in the first place? It is a fascinating question that really demands intellectual humility, and one that I hope leaves you eager to keep exploring these concepts on your own. Thanks so much for learning with me today.